Welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris Rimbold. Today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite topics. It's very near and dear to my heart. It's the topic of self-employment and entrepreneurship. I've been self-employed for about 5.5 years now, and for about 3 of those years I also served as a mentor for helping people become self-employed and do what I did as well. And I would like to make a video today for anybody who is self-employed and going through some of the struggles of it, or is considering self-employment and wants to hear more about it from someone who is in it for a while. So here's my story. Before I went self-employed, I had been in hourly jobs and hourly plus bonus jobs, and frankly, I did pretty good. Here is an award that I got from my last employer, and I just generally, I like to hold myself to a high standard of performance and overachieve quite a bit. It's not for everybody, and it can tend to run me ragged a little bit, to have that tendency sometimes, but that's just how I operate. And it occurred to me after years of being in an hourly job that I valued my time more than what I was selling it for. So my hourly rate that I was getting paid, to me, my time was worth more than that. And I began to think of, well, maybe there's a better way to do this. I heard about self-employment, I've heard about entrepreneurship, and for me, that seemed kind of like it was far out there, that maybe it wasn't for me and it would be too hard to get into. But increasingly, I heard more and more about commission-only positions, and those two words, commission-only, kind of stuck in my mind. And for somebody who is an overachiever and pushes super hard all the time, more than pretty much anybody else around, especially in an hourly job, it really got me to thinking. Eventually, though, I had some big dreams, like I wanted cool cars. I've always been interested in sports cars. I wanted an airplane. I wanted a big house with a pool, all that good stuff. But my salary just wasn't going to provide that, unfortunately, and I wanted something more. And so it was kind of a materialistic drive that led me to start thinking about other opportunities. So in order to get all those material things that I want, I would need to find somewhere that just paid me more, or find something where my work ethic converted into a higher income because it was commission only. Now, those were the lines I was thinking along at the end of 2014 and going into 2015, and I ended up actually getting fired from my job. It had gotten to the point where I was a high performer. I hit my quotas every quarter, usually vastly exceeded them, maxed out the bonuses, but there were some internal issues going on with the company, and they needed to show their client, which was the team that I worked on, some productivity. And to do that, they decided to measure the number of phone calls as a metric, and so I just made a bunch of phone calls to robo lines just to stand out as a spike in their report, just to kind of be immature and say, hey, what you're doing doesn't matter. And naturally, that didn't go over very well. I don't blame them for not appreciating that. So ended up getting fired for that. And when I was leaving the building, I actually was pretty happy to have burned my bridges and not have quit, but instead get fired and not even be eligible for reemployment, because frankly, I was not that brave to go to a self-employment opportunity on my own. I kind of needed to be kicked out to do it. And so that worked out really well for me. I'm really glad I did get fired, because frankly, I don't know when I would have started my self-employment journey otherwise. But anyway, I had about $10,000, 10 grand to live on. And for me at the time, that was 3 months worth of gliding distance before I would be just out of money. I was renting, I was living with some of my best friends, and I'll be out of money in 3 months. I figured for sure I can find something good in 3 months, right? That's the thing about going self-employed is even if you do get a role, even if you do get a position, even if you do get a contract, even if you do start a business, it's probably going to take more than day one to get paid. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they go self-employed or when they join the company that I am contracted with right now as a self-employed agent, is they expect that money will be coming in pretty quickly. You need to realize there will be some time before that actually happens. And we'll talk about why it's worth to wait the time, but for me, I got into a job search where I was looking for commission only, was looking for good products, good mentors, and that was my criteria. I wanted commission, good products, and people that would be of good moral and ethical character to show me how to help people with those products. And ended up interviewing several places, and the last place I interviewed, the one that I ended up contracting with, was a health insurance agency for self-employed and individuals, because most people get their health insurance through a job, but not everybody does. And a lot of small businesses and self-employed people out there have to figure out what they're going to do for health insurance. But ended up working with them. They were in startup mode at the time. It was about, I think, 20 people in that whole office. And at this point, I think they're pushing 1,000 here 5 years later, just in that branch of the company. And there's several branches of it, but that one has grown a lot since I joined. And I ended up working way more than I had in a corporate job, just way more. At the corporate job, yes, I did put in some overtime, maybe work an hour or two later, go from 7 a.m. to maybe 6 p.m. kind of a thing. But with self-employment, you have to learn a new trade. You have to often get a license, like I had to get my life and health licenses. I had to study for those, take an online course, and pass the state exam. And if you didn't pass it, it was a month back then before you could take it again, so the stakes were high. And so I studied a lot and took as much training and ride-alongs from the other people there that I could. And I would say I ended up working 60, 70, 80-hour weeks after that. And that is a lot of work for somebody who's not used to it, but for somebody that likes work, especially being busy, like I definitely liked being busy back then. For me, that was awesome. And so it worked out well for me. I would have to say that that $10,000 in savings was just the right amount, because when I got hired in January 2015 to when I made my first sale, found my first customer, helped somebody out for the first time, it was 3 months. 3 months before I got my first commission from the new position. So try to have at least 3 months, especially if you're a super driven person, before setting off on your own and being self-employed. But I wanted to make sure that nobody has a illusion that when you leave corporate America, suddenly you have more time and more money. It's just not how it works. You have less time and less money, and you have to build a system for yourself about how that converts into income and converts into freedom. It doesn't happen on its own. So I ended up making about, I would say, 130% of what I had made at the corporate job, income-wise, that first year in self-employment. So the income was very good, and the time commitment was, of course, very high as well. But here, 5 years later, 5.5 years later, I have 4x'd my income, so it's 4 times higher than it used to be. My freedom of time is far, far higher, so I can make these videos and talk to you in the middle of a day if I want to. And even better than the income and the time, though, is I'm able to spend quality time with my wife, who is an awesome person and actually probably works harder and is definitely more creative than I am. I get to spend a lot of time with her. I get to spend time with good friends and mentors as well, people that are further along in the journey of self-employment and entrepreneurship that I want to learn from. I can spend time with them and learn from them. And probably the most important thing for me is all the personal development that has happened along the way. For example, emotional mastery, being able to not go through big swings of depression and excitement and anxiety and just being on top of the world. Those emotional swings really happen to a lot of people when they become self-employed, because there's victories and there's defeats, and they're big and they happen just one after another. Going through those things and intentionally doing some personal development, reading some books, and doing some studying on that topic is going to make you just mentally tough. It's going to make you more patient. It's going to give you more compassion, more joy, and more love in your life. So if those things just sound good to you, self-employment is a great way to gain the discipline needed to just live a better life. As far as what I want to do from here is I have several goals. I kind of divided them into income and entrepreneurship and creative endeavors as well. For creative endeavors, I want to write a book every year. I've already started my first book. It is in progress right now. It is about personal development, and as it becomes more than just a 15-page draft and it gets longer and longer and more developed, I'll start sharing more about it. I would also like to, in the next 10 years, probably shorter time period than that, frankly, start a company. The sectors that interest me most are electric, aviation, and then a completely different sector, just a personal development company. Maybe one or both of those. And as far as income goes, I have very, very large income goals to hit, and it's no longer about just getting cool cars and a big house and an airplane and all that. Of course, that stuff is still interesting to me. Who wouldn't it be? But it's more about having the leverage to make a difference in the areas that you want to impact. Because if you don't have resources, then it's harder to make a difference. But yeah, that is my self-employed journey. And I'm going to do a little screen recording here so that you can see the freedom of time estimate that I've got here for how it goes to be self-employed. So you'll see on the left side is the freedom axis, and that's kind of freedom of time is what I'm thinking. And on the horizontal axis, we've got years in business. So the starting point here is where you start out. It's kind of a 9 to 5, and you're like, oh wow, I need to work more. And oh wait, I'm still not getting any results. I need to make more income to pay my bills. And so your time freedom goes way down that first year. And then in your second year, maybe you have some victories and you get some more freedom of time back. And then you get a little bit complacent. Happens to everybody. And then your freedom of time goes back down. And then heading into year 3, you're a little bit more mature, so those dips aren't quite as pronounced. And your freedom of time really reaches where it was before you became self-employed, probably about generally between 3 and 4 years into it. And then you maybe bite off more than you can chew, and then your time freedom goes down a little bit, and then you realize what's important towards year 5, like me, and then your freedom of time goes up. And it's just to the moon from there. But yeah, thanks for watching. Let me know if you're thinking about being self-employed or if you are self-employed as well. It is probably one of the toughest things that you can do is say, I'm going to go work for myself. And you will find that it will challenge every fiber of your being. You'll go through some crazy emotional ups and downs. You'll probably have to become a different version of yourself if you're going to succeed, a better version of yourself. And all of the relationships in your life will be tested, and you will identify quickly which ones are toxic, which ones aren't useful, and aren't helping anybody in the relationship, which ones matter, and then who believes in you and who is going to stand by your side no matter what. So it'll test everything about you. I highly recommend it. It is, in my opinion, the best way to build time freedom and income freedom, especially here in the USA. Thank you for watching. I look forward to bringing you some more content. We've got some cool things coming up. And I'm Chris Rimble. Thank you so much for watching. Love you all.